I think the biggest thing I'm seeing is that kids do not want to be stuck in the middle. Just make your decisions.
Reach it.
Just make your decisions. Like Helen said, you made your decision to divorce. Just get on with it.
I'm Amanda Silver.
And I'm Alex Howard.
And this is Dirty Laundry. They're back.
They're back.
The ladies from RiseUp Counselling are back to share their personal experience with divorce.
Yeah, we've really looked behind the curtain.
Yes.
I was going to say taken off the cloak, but that just seems inappropriate.
Veil?
We have gone
No veil.
behind.
The veil's funny.
The veil. Oh,
Come on, the
we should have done that. That was
veil.
funny. Anyways, Helen and Gabbi are back. And they are sharing some personal stories about their own divorce, about being a child of divorce, how their kids dealt with divorce, not to mention
What they see in their practices.
exactly.
Yeah.
So please give a warm welcome.
Helen and
Put your
Gabbi.
hands together. We are not
Hands
a
up
live
in
show.
the air. So, welcome Gabbi and Helen. Welcome back.
Thank
Welcome
you.
back to Dirty Laundry.
Our first second timers.
Yeah,
Yay.
first repeaters.
Woo.
Thank you for coming back. Well, actually, we've come to you today. So thank you
Yes.
for having us.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Your
so much
lovely
for-
office.
Yeah.
Beautiful
Oh,
space.
thank
I
you.
would like to pay a little bit of homage to your mirrors on the ceiling in the bathroom because that
Oh,
was a
right.
fun surprise for me.
This is a very eclectic home. It's a house, obviously, a very old house converted to an office. We have some, other therapists outside. And yes, there are mirrors on the ceilings in the bathroom, but we also have pink chairs in our office. So
I
Balances
love
it out.
it. I love it. I love it.
And so today we want to talk about
Kids.
kids,
and
children of divorce. Yeah.
Yes. You have a firsthand view of it from so many different perspectives, right? From your clients and, your personal lives. One of you have gone through it. One of you as parents went through it. So you really have an interesting perspective to bring to how it feels like as a child to go through, watching your parents, split up and having to deal with all that follows that. So we're really happy to have you guys here to share your perspectives.
So why don't we start, just if you're comfortable, Helen, with telling us a little bit about your firsthand experience, because it's rare that we get to talk to adults that were children of divorce. And if you're willing, share a little bit of kind of like those early years. Like what age were you when your parents split?
let me preface this by saying that we were immigrants from Russia. We had been in Calgary for about we left Russia. We were in Calgary, and then we were very new to Toronto. I was 10, and at 13, just after my kids, right after my birthday, my mom sat my sister and I down and in her bedroom. And the reason why I'm giving these details is because when we tell our clients that this narrative is important and it sticks with your children forever. I am in my mid-40s, and I remember this day very clearly. I mean, maybe, I don't remember all sort of the intricate details about it, but I remember it. And my mom sat my sister and I down, my sister was 16, and had begged my mom to divorce my dad for years.
Oh, wow.
They did not have a great relationship. There were moments that were good, but they did not have a great relationship. Again, two immigrants, in Canada, doesn't really know the language, struggling to make ends meet. And my mom sat us down and said, "I'm leaving your dad." And I remember just thinking to myself, well, happy effing birthday to me, because I had just turned 13. And then things just went fast forward from there. She told us the reason. My dad was using cocaine. He was cheating on her. He had been physically aggressive with her that we had observed. And she told us all the details. And so this is how I remember it, whether or not it happened in this way, I don't know for sure. But very shortly after that, so we lived in an apartment building on the 12th floor, and my mother's best friend lived on the 11th floor. And very shortly after, if not the same day, we literally picked up what we could and went to the 11th floor.
Wow.
Okay, same building. And I remember feeling scared. I remember feeling like, oh my God, my dad's like right above us. Like, what's going to happen? He obviously wasn't part of the conversation. So here we go. We take what we can. We go to the 11th floor. And the next thing I know, or what I recall, is my dad coming down and banging on the door saying, like, come home, come home, come home. We did not do that. So needless to say, I lived in fear, leaving the building, going to the elevator. Am I going to see him? My mother didn't drive, but he did. So like, I always saw his car parked where it was. And so that's sort of what I remember in terms of fear. And then he refused to give us any of our stuff, our bedroom stuff. And then my mother, again, who had did the best that she could, but had no resources, none whatsoever. A, couldn't afford it, and B, what we're doing didn't exist.
Yeah.
There was no, like, who was she going to talk to? And not only that, in the Russian community, they were the first to get divorced. So it was like shamed upon, right? Like, oh my God, none of my parents, like really nobody I knew was divorced. So there was like a shame element to it as well. So we moved down to the second floor. My mother was able to get enough money to get first and last months, but now we're in the second floor of the same building. And my mom needed our furniture. And again, I don't know the time span of all of this, but I can say that it wasn't like, it wasn't months. It was pretty quickly after. He refused to give us anything. So he goes to a wedding one night, and my mom calls in the troops, the cousins, and all that kind of stuff, and quote unquote breaks into our apartment and gets our stuff, gets our furniture, She was very kind. She left one plate for him, one pot, one pan, to make sure that he had what he needed, but took what we needed. And I guess in those days stole it. I mean, it was ours, but it was viewed as stealing it. So we did that. And then he came home from the wedding that night. And as you can imagine, it was an ugly scene. I don't remember, again, whether there was police. I don't remember any of that kind of stuff, but I just remember it was traumatic. And then for years later, that's how we lived, in the same building, fearing this man. My dad was an asshole. I want to be very clear. There were moments where he was kind, but my memory of their marriage was that he was a jerk. And, but it was important for me I knew that. I didn't want other people to tell me that. I didn't want to hear my mother tell me. I didn't want to hear my mother's best friend say it. I didn't want to hear people talk shit about him. But I knew he was a jerk, and that was it was enough. But to hear other people say it was hard. And I think about oh my God, if my mother had family counseling, would it have been different? I don't think it would have been different because I already had sort of a impression of him and an experience. I was old enough to have an experience with him, but it may not have impacted me the way that it did throughout my young adult years. But yeah, he would we would see him. I would run. I don't know what I was running from. Did I think he was going to beat me? No, but I was fearful. He would do things like he didn't pay child support. That was not a thing. And there were no lawyers or mediators involved. And, so when he threw some money, he did, he would get my sister a car. And then a month later, it was repoed. At 18, I think I must have been 17 or 16. And my sister was probably 18, 19. He invited us out for dinner for Swiss Chalet. Okay. I don't really know why, but we're going to go. We sit down for dinner and he asks us to invest in apartment buildings with him. So he pretty much asked us for money, and we were working. We had no choice. We were working. But again, these are kind of the experience. So I knew he was a jerk. It's no one had to tell me, but I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear it from other people. So that was sort of my experience with sort of those very early years. And I mean, to kind of fast forward, I did not have a relationship growing up. My mom eventually remarried and we moved out of the apartment building, but not far. I mean, it was within walking distance of where we were. Didn't go too far. No, but we did move down the street. And yeah, and then and that's sort of where my memory gets a little bit more foggy. He moved. We didn't really have any contact with him. And then I heard he was like maybe in Russia and then maybe in Israel. And then he tried to reach out every once in a while on Facebook. He didn't spell my sister's name right. Like, just little things like that, which may not be a big deal. But when you see your sister's name not spelled right.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. Anyway, so fast forward, did not have a relationship. He's never met my children. He has he's never met my husband. And he passed away, in, I think 2019 or 2020. And I found out on Facebook that he died. Yeah, so that was sort of a moment where, you had to, like, he was never a part of my life, but the fact that he was like dead is a whole new element.
Yeah.
There's so much a part of your life. They're a part of your biology that even if they're not in the day to day, it is this piece of you.
That is there. You still know that they're there.
Yeah.
You wonder what they're doing. You wonder who they're with. You wonder what their life looks like.
How many half siblings I might have.
Did you
I
ever
don't know. You know what?
You don't know.
I have
Everything
no
you
idea.
learned on Facebook.
Everything I learned, I learned on
That's-
Facebook.
Wow.
And that's hard in and of itself.
Yeah.
To not even be informed, part of the like inner circle of knowing.
Yeah, and when I did know, when I did ask questions, there was nothing positive that came. Like it was always
Right.
negative information. He had issues, and
Yeah.
so, but I was not getting anything nice about it. So
Yeah.
sometimes I just didn't want to know.
But sometimes you were curious.
Yeah,
And then sometimes, if I recall, not to step in on your story, is that you didn't always know if the information was accurate.
that is true. I do remember once. Someone had said he had died, like
Right.
years before he actually died.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
I remember.
So I started like calling, and he was in Hamilton at that time, and so I started calling around morgues and hospitals because I needed closure. I needed to know
Yeah.
if he was dead or not. And so no one knew, like nothing. And then I just like, okay, I don't know, done. And I remember standing in Home Depot one day. I was with my husband. My phone rang. I answered it. He said my face went white. It was my dad. Okay, I thought the guy was dead. And I'm standing at Home Depot looking for like doors.
Calls you.
And he calls me. So he wasn't dead at that time.
Okay.
But he did die several years. But even that, and I remember my husband saying, like, is this the time you want to sort of get to know him? Is this the time you want to sort of repair or whatever?
Yeah.
He didn't use the word repair, whatever it was. And I was just like, no, I still didn't want to, but I just needed to know.
And how beautiful that you got that opportunity to know that, because many people only get it after that parent or whomever has passed. And you're like, oh shit, if I could do it again, I would have mended that fence or I would have built back
Right.
that bridge. Now it's too late. And you only know upon someone's death, you were almost gifted this little opportunity
Right.
of
And I still didn't want it. I was like, here you go. Still
and
don't
you
want
didn't
it.
want
There you
it,
go.
but then you
Yeah.
knew,
Yeah.
which is so, I don't know. I don't want to say lucky, but what a great insight to have
Yeah.
prior to actually experiencing the real thing.
Yeah. And then he died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you got confirmation.
And then I got
I think
confirmation.
you checked a few times. You triple checked.
Yeah.
Do your kids ask about him?
So, when my kids, my mom remarried when I was 15. Another messy story. I didn't go to the wedding because here's the other thing with kids of divorce. They
Okay.
don't know how to process and they don't know. And this is why it's important. This reintroduction of partners will leave a lasting impression, which is the work that Gabby and I do a lot in terms of with our clients around how do you do this? Because you can't just say, here's your new dad, right? Or
Call
whatever.
him daddy.
Yeah, right.
Or have a boyfriend move in, or like,
and which is
right?
again,
Which is what happens a lot.
My mom,
Yeah.
I love her, but she did everything wrong, which is what that. We have a new boy, and then there were a couple of boyfriends that moved in. Again, single woman, trying to sort of just make ends meet. But the last sort of one was, he just got off the boat, like from Russia. He's moving in with us, and he's got 2 kids, and we're all gonna live one big happy family.
I think every parent has to make a decision for their own kids and what they want to tell them, what they want to share, what they feel they can handle, and when.
Yeah.
And there's no rush. Sometimes it happens without your, before you're ready. But I guess at what point, like, how would it have helped them to tell them when they're 3 years old that this
Right.
grandfather isn't their biological grandfather, but
Right.
he's their grandfather in every other sense of the term.
Exactly.
Right.
And I mean, I call my stepfather by his first name. So, this was never meant to be a secret.
Right.
It's not like it was just when it felt that they could understand it, was sort of when I was kind of aiming for, but it was never meant to be a secret.
And really, I mean, even the term not your real grandfather, like,
Right.
I don't love that. I've had a stepfather for more than I've had a biological father in terms of parenting. And I just think I get really offended with, that's not your real dad. Well, what the fuck does that even mean?
When you say your
Blood?
dad,
Like,
you're talking about your stepdad.
yeah, which then gets confusing because my dad came back into my life.
Oh.
And now I'm like, there's too many dads.
He's a bio dad.
So that's bio dad and then just regular dad. But yeah, I mean, same thing, call my stepdad by his first name. So there was never a trying to, I guess, show the kids that he was not. So I was like, no, this grandma married this other guy and here we are, but it's hard. A lot of times too, even with like adoption, you're kind of like, when do we tell the kids? Do we not? Do we pretend? It's always going to come out in my, personal opinion. I think they always find out. The truth always
different
comes.
if it's their adoption versus maybe your own. Like I think that's
Absolutely.
different,
And
right?
a parent versus a grandparent.
Right.
Who you're maybe not seeing every
Exactly.
day.
If it's a child's adoption or their sibling is adopted, I think that's a conversation you need to have as they grow up. And I mean, you guys are the experts, but I think that's something that should be done right away and sort of normalized.
Well, I wanted to just comment on what you were saying about stepdad and parents and grandparents who you didn't know. My kids have 4 parents and they believe they have 4 parents, but they believe they had 4 parents before other people believed. So even my husband's family who'd be like, well, wait, he had started to really adjust to being in a father figure role, and that relationship was established. And when he was given the space to be able to develop those relationships independently, as well as my kid's stepmom. But his family sometimes would be, well, they're not your real kids. And it's like, well, no, but I raised them. They're not my biological kids, but I've been in their lives for longer than their mom and dad were together now. So, and it took them some time to actually agree that those are your kids. And so they're looked at like, so my in-laws now look at my kids as their grandkids, right? And so but everyone works, it's like change management. Everyone kind of adapts and grows at different phases and stages. So if you ask my kids how many parents they have 4 parents. I go, it's a lot. I sort of just acknowledge sometimes you get a lot of parents and a lot of personalities.
A lot of opinions.
It's a lot of
too.
opinions, but they know who to go to for what they
kids are so
need
smart.
and
They have a menu. They have a buffet of parents
they have
to
a
choose from.
buffet. It's like, go to your stepmom. She's a teacher. Let her do that. Or, whatever. They just know. They know.
That's great.
I've always seen it as it's just more people to love my
them.
kids.
I know.
And like, how special is that?
I know. It's true.
We should all be so lucky as to have 4 parents. Yeah.
My kids know that I probably communicate more with their dads, like their stepmom, than their dad sometimes.
Right.
So their dad is more
no
the
baggage.
logistic stuff, right? Some of the things that we just need to organize, the finances, whatever, no problem. But anything emotional, any sort of like how the kids are doing, getting ready for university, I go to their stepmom.
Yeah.
It's great. It's easier.
Having another wife almost.
I know.
Like,
I'm like, well,
sister
I go,
wife or
you
something.
can deal with your husband.
yeah, exactly.
It's not my problem anymore.
Not my problem.
They've done that.
And it's done.
But I think also for you, and I think for any sort of successful step parenting, is that they've earned their
Space.
they've earned their space, right? Like it's not just sort of given to them by right, just because this is my new partner or this is whatever. Like they have to earn it, and they have to sort of earn their seat at the table. And so
And it takes time.
It takes time.
time.
It takes a lot of time. So when my mom got remarried, they met at an office Christmas party in December. They went on a trip over New Year's. They were engaged on Valentine's Day, and they were married that July.
Wow.
How long had your parents been divorced by that point?
4 years.
Okay.
3, actually, if I'm being 3.5, I'm trying to go based on my age. So it was 8 to 12, basically, for me.
That's fast.
Super fast. So you talk about bringing this new person home, and all of a sudden it was like, hi, here's this new guy who you've met once. We're now engaged. Oh, and we're moving from Toronto to Ottawa, which that's a whole other story. But I didn't have a chance even to be like, well, but do I like him? Do I know him? Like, it is a lot. And perspective, obviously, in age has given me a completely different, sort of understanding, or I guess ability to even empathize really with that whole scenario. Here's my mom, single mom, 4 kids. Like, what the heck do you do? And it's the 80s, 90s. Like, it's a very different time. But yeah, it took a while for us even to really be comfortable with this strange man living in our house.
Yeah.
And it's funny now as a parent, I think about that. Like, would I just move this dude in?
I couldn't imagine.
I can't imagine.
And I'm
yet,
a single parent. I couldn't imagine doing that. Like, just overnight. Like, I just feel like it would be
in a couple months.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
Like,
But plenty of people do.
plenty of people do. And their
it's
whole
a sacred space, though. It's like my kids. I protect my kids. Like, the idea of, like, if I had a boyfriend and had him, I could not see, like, bringing a boyfriend in to move in with my kids. Like, I feel like there's a long process for that.
I think there's also like logistical issues for people, right? Like sometimes it's based on finances. They need someone to come in. They need help, they need help, or they need help with the kids, or, there's a number of reasons I think why people end up in situations where they are doing sort of the sudden move in. I think for my mom, it was like based on sort of some based on need, and also just her self-worth, right? Like again, going back around, like it's just what a shame. Like,
well, she's an immigrant,
she's
in part of a community.
And now you're the only one divorced, and like you're a disgrace to really the community. And
you
so
better
find a partner,
find someone who can take care of you.
Legitimate in the eyes of the community.
That's the thing. We talk about stigma now. What did it look like 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Way worse. To be a single woman living on your own, having kids and no man to protect you. And I mean, that's asking a lot of women nowadays. We're looking through a completely different lens. But for them, it was financial as well. But I mean, I remember asking them, just being like, how did you know? I mean, they've now been married over 25 years, 27 years. How did you know? And they're both like, well, we had been through a shitty marriage. We knew what a good partner looks like. And so sometimes I think too, again, age and perspective, right? You go through your own journey and you're.
So how long would you say that it kind of took you to adjust or settle into this new norm of yours?
I think in many ways I was also lucky in that I was entering teenagehood and could care less about my parents.
Right.
Like I had my head so far up my own ass with my own issues and like checking out boys and
We moved,
which was tough, but we had moved a lot. I think I don't know if it was like just the way our family operated, but every 2 to 3 years we moved schools. I think I calculated once I'd been to like 9 or 10 schools by the time I graduated high school.
Wow.
Yeah, we moved a lot. And in many ways I loved it because I'm like, yes, fresh start. Reinvention. Who am I going to be at this new school? What kind of persona am I going to take on?
That must be an acting personality because my daughter has no problem doing that too.
Yeah. Definitely had no problems taking on different roles on the stage.
I feel like that explains a lot of like your adulthood.
Now we get it.
I'm
all
starting to
coming
understand
together.
now. It's so much better.
And I can, as much as I can make friends really quick and kind of enter these social situations, I despise them, as you also found out. Meeting new people gives me like such anxiety and like literally sick to my stomach, but I can do it. And so nobody ever believes that I'm an introvert.
So
Exactly, because I've had so much practice.
Really, you do it really well.
Yeah, but to answer your question, thankfully I kind of was just like, didn't really care. I'm also one of 4. So no matter how much we moved, no matter how much our life changed, I had my siblings and we were kind of each other's whole life.
You
I think
middle,
that's a big-
older, younger?
Third middle. So third girl and then a little baby brother.
Oh.
Yeah.
And do you see a difference in how your siblings manage?
You know what? I have to say, and I don't know if she's going to be listening or not, but my eldest sister protected us from so much. So when I think about how the divorce, and I obviously don't want to speak on her behalf, but when I think about how the divorce affected me versus my other siblings, I see her sort of having that stereotypical kind of reaction to parents divorcing. She struggled a bit more with relationships and, sort of trusting people, things like that. Whereas I think she kind of took the brunt of it from the rest of us. We all, my other sister and my brother and I are just kind of go with the flow, like not as impacted. And my brother being the littlest. And also I think the boy was different. Yeah. He's probably the least impacted. Like you would never know. He just kind of goes about his business. No trouble with relationships.
Mike's the same way. And my daughter's the older one. I have a little boy who's like, it kind of goes over his head. Like he's just like so much younger when it all happened.
Exactly.
Like,
How old were your kids?
So when we separated, my kids were 3 and 6 weeks.
3 and 6 weeks. Yeah. Okay.
So for him, for my
Yeah,
little
he
guy,
doesn't
it was
know any
just-
different.
he
Yeah.
doesn't know. And also, I think there's like a boy-girl thing too, where he just
think
sort of
so.
like goes with the flow. And
So
you
I
know.
found that my son was very good at compartmentalizing.
Mm-hmm.
So when he was at my house, he was at my house. And when he was at
Interesting.
dad's house, he was at dad's
Yeah.
house. And he was just able to like, the phone calls were short. Like he
Yeah.
wasn't interested. And you would think like, oh, he doesn't want to talk to me. It's not it. He's just like
tunnel vision on
tunnel
what
vision.
he's doing.
Exactly. I'm here. It's
Yes.
all fine.
And I wonder if that's a
I
form
noticed
of protection.
that too with my kids.
Absolutely. But I
Yeah.
also think he was very young. He was
Yeah.
3. He was just turned 3. And so, I mean, this is all he knew. He didn't know any different. He didn't know anything. He couldn't remember us together.
Right.
So it was,
And now as they're teens,
Oh, yeah.
how can you see long-term effects from your divorce?
no, I see normal teenage
Yeah.
stuff. Like I always, when people are worried about long-term effects, I worry about the stigma around teenagers are teenagers.
Yes.
So like you can be, a brat and get
Yeah.
caught into substances and all sorts of stuff at any age,
Yeah.
or you cannot. I think their personalities
Mhm,
come out and we can't always just blame because I got
Yeah.
divorced.
Oh, it's
I
the
think that's key.
divorce.
It's the
Yeah.
divorce.
Yeah.
It's because, I do have compassion for my kids having to go back and forth and adjust to do different homes sometimes. So I try to, spend what time I can with them and
Yeah.
make compromises. I think my son had to bring a suit to school for his business project. And my husband's like, why are you driving him? It's around the corner. I'm like, because it's time together. And he doesn't ask for a lot. I'm like, in other circumstances, it's not a big deal. And
Right,
he's
things
a
that
good kid.
other people may not
Yeah,
recognize
Yeah.
when you're divorced and you don't have as much time with the kids.
How can I say, with my kids being 3 and 6 and now teenagers and university age, how can I say they're impacted? How would I know?
Yeah.
How do you know?
And that was the
Right.
one catalyst that made them choose
No.
path A versus B.
Yeah,
Right, how
I
do you
know.
know that's
do
the
you know?
variable in
No.
whatever's causing their,
Because
behavior.
think about it. Everybody, we all have something. We all have shtick somewhere,
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's insecurity, whether it's, having bad like everyone's got something. So how am I supposed to say that my teenage kids are who they are because their quirks, whatever they are, is because of the divorce? I can't say
And
that.
let's be honest. Some parents that stay together that should have been divorced cause way more damage,
That's right.
in my opinion, than parents that divorce and go on to live very happy lives.
Like
And
how
role
you-
model healthy relationships versus an unhealthy one.
And I think my kids are pretty well rounded. The one thing I always say is that when people are worried, I said, but it provides kids with resiliency. They have to learn to adapt to the different environments, right? This builds resiliency. So I think my kids are they're able to adjust to change pretty good. I mean, I don't know. I think my kids
So are
think
you,
my kids
Alex.
turned
You
out
adjust
pretty well.
change all the time.
Fantastic.
my
Lots
kids are
of
pretty
change, yeah.
fantastic.
Kids are more
You
than
sound
fantastic.
fantastic.
They are.
And you sound very proud of them. So I'm curious though, from those are your perspectives, but also from your perspective as a therapist, because you are working with children. You are working with children who obviously we can't interview, we can't speak to them directly. But I'm curious to know what you're seeing with your own practices and how children are going through this in today's environment.
Well, I think, one of the things that I'm seeing the most is that kids will come in here and, parents right away think that their kids need therapy because they're getting a divorce. They're like, okay, we need to send them to therapy. And Gabby and I are always like, no, that's not to say, listen, we're therapists. Of course we want, if you need therapy, you need to go to therapy, but it's not the first step that you need to take. Not every child needs to go through therapy when their parents are getting divorced. The question is, what's your co-parenting relationship like? What's the conflict like? What are you not saying versus what you are saying? Because what you don't say is just as important as what you do say, and your kids are watching. And what kids are always telling us is that my parents made a decision. They made a decision to get a divorce. Okay. I'm the one that is impacted the most. I'm the one that has to pack the bag. I'm the one that has to forget my favorite sweater at one parent's house versus the next. I'm the one that has to think about, what do I need next week? Or, how do I get to this place when I'm at one parent's house, but, this function is at the other parent's house. And so kids are impacted because they're the ones, they think doing all the work. And really they are. I mean, Gabby mentioned around sort of having compassion around going from home to home, being empathetic to that. Parents have made a decision. You're not going to apologize for the decision. You made a decision to divorce, and that is what it is. But what you can do is sort of provide compassion and empathy to their experience of what it is that they're going through. And maybe they are not, lots of kids will say, none of my friends' parents are divorced. And I'll say, I don't know about that. Do you guys talk about this? And they're like, no, we never talk about it. And I said, I bet you if you were to specifically ask the question, you would find at least a couple of friends whose parents are divorced. And so there's still the shame and the stigma attached to it that kids aren't talking about it. So they come here and they're like, spilling it.
They're unburdened here. Yeah.
So that's sort of what I'm seeing with kids. I don't know about you, Gab.
I think the biggest thing I'm seeing is that kids do not want to be stuck in the middle. Just make your decisions.
Preach it.
Just make your decisions. Like Helen said, you made your decision to divorce. Just get on with it. Get on with it. I want to go to school. I want to see my friends. I don't, too much sharing of information with kids. Too much, there's this huge balance between how much do we give the kids a voice and how much do we keep them out of the conflict.
Yes.
And, depending on age, depending on my kids, 3 and 6, no. But if you have a 13-year-old, maybe and it's not, and we talked about this before, and it's not because they like one parent better than the other, but let's look at their life, right? And how do you maintain healthy relationships? It's more about quality over quantity.
Yes.
And if you can have quality at 50%, great. If you can have quality at 30, 70, great. But how do you give that kid quality of life over fighting over quantity and fighting over all the little different things? The quicker you can resolve it, the quicker the kids can move on with their lives. It damages them more the longer it goes on and the longer people's egos are at play, right? So that there's no compassion. And so these kids just don't want to be in the middle of it. They don't want to know all the dirty details because then they do get impacted. And that causes, it just snowballs. We're watching things snowball and we're trying to catch it before it gets too big. And we have little control to be able to do that. We want to shake people.
They don't see it, or they can't see it, or they objectify their kids,
or they make
own
excuses.
the time. This is my time. I own it.
But I think emotionally, when there's big emotions, it drives their decisions, right? And so you're not thinking sort of logically or rationally around. So, here's an example. You have a child who just came back from a parent's home and who had a fight, right? Or whatever. And so they're coming back to, the other parent saying, I'm so mad at this parent and I can't believe them. They're so mean. And, they start sort of going off about that parent because they got punished when they skipped first period. And, and so it's an opportunity for the parent to align with the child.
Yeah,
like,
you're right.
You're right. You know what?
They shouldn't have done that.
He's so mean, or, I can't believe they did that. And so you start sort of having this conversation about confirming this notion. And as I had said before, I knew my father was a jerk, but I didn't want to hear it from anybody else. So even when I was complaining about it, and I'm not talking about my friends, I'm talking about adults who I respected and looked up to. I didn't need to hear it from them because it was hurtful and it was painful because every child, and I think in our work in child welfare, what we know is no matter what an adult has done to a child in terms of a parent-child relationship, the child wants a relationship with that parent. And so whether it's false hope or whatever it is, but they yearn for that relationship. And so when they're coming back to the other parent and now their other parent is speaking crap about the other parent, maybe in that moment it's like, yeah, that feels good or whatever. But at the end of the day, the kid's like, screw you. That's my other parent. And then they start sort of having all these reactions.
Or they buy into it. And then it just helps.
I guess the question is how then,
it.
if you're giving advice to parents, how then do you validate that the kid's upset and without, throwing the other parent, pushing the under parent under the bus?
It is so,
Right?
it's
It's a hard
easier.
balance.
No, it's easier than you think.
Yeah.
It's easier than you think. It's a simple rule of thumb. I just said it to one of my dads yesterday. I said, even if you don't agree, you validate and then you redirect. So as simple as saying something like, wow, that must have been a really difficult conversation you had with your mom, dad, whoever. That's really hard. But I trust that the two of you guys are going to sort that out, right? Just like when we fight, we try to sort it out. stay out of it. Right?
But empathize with their experience. Allow them to
empathize.
have the experience without fixing the problem for them, right? I'm going to go
Yeah.
talk to that parent. They didn't let you go to that party. I'm going to go
right.
talk
That's
to the
called
parent.
triangulation.
Right. So but
It's also
empathizing
an
with their
age thing,
experience.
too. If you have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old who can't speak for themselves versus a 13-year-old, you can give them the tools, right? You can encourage them to speak up for themselves.
Well, the 4 or 5-year-old, I mean, they're reacting and having temper tantrums. You have to look at the age, the developmental age, right? They can't communicate it. So if there's parenting strategies that are not working or they're not, it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
If we're talking safety, we're having a different conversation, right? We're talking, then how do you talk to the other parent around saying, well, I think the car seat wasn't done properly. Can I help you do that? Like, we're not trying to attack the other parent. We don't want to do a tit for tat. We want to be able to build success so the child has healthy relationships with both parents. That's it. How do you do that? How do you support that?
Not by keeping score.
No.
Right? And that's what, well, on this date, you did this and you didn't. That's not going to help the long-term situation.
And I think regardless of the age of the children, i.e. even if they're adult children, keep them out of it.
Yes, even if they're adult children.
I feel like we're in this era of we want to empower our kids. We want to give them all this information, let them decide. And what we think is validating their feelings or empowering them is actually putting them in the middle of the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And so at what point do you step back and just say, I know that you're, a 30-year-old adult and I'm now divorcing your whatever dad. It's still none of your business, or you still don't need to worry about it. We got this. Because even now, like I said, my mom and stepdad have been married for nearly 30 years. I still find myself put in the middle of things. And only now, especially doing this work, am I able to stand up and be like, you know what? Not my problem. You chose to have him first, have me, then you chose to leave him, then you chose to marry this guy. Not my fucking problem.
Yeah.
But it's taken me 40 years to stand up and be like, actually, no, I'm not. I'm no longer interested in whatever it is you think you want to pull me in at. But it's hard for parents when they see their children, especially adult children, as allies or as a friend, where we confide in each other about other things, relationship problems or, current affairs, whatever it is we're talking about, to flip that gear and go, oh, right, but you're still my kid. And this is still not your problem. Yeah. And I think we have to remember that because we protect the younger kids. We don't often think to protect the older ones.
Yeah. Even till this day, I don't ask my mom. I don't have conversations about my dad to my mom because A, I think it's triggering for her. But B, it's like, it's just, it's always something negative. It's always like, some story of like what a piece of shit he was or how he didn't pay child support or how he didn't get, like, it's always something. So I'm not engaging. I don't ask questions. So there's a huge part of my identity that I don't know. Like I don't know my father's side of the family. I don't know their medical history, like, which is a whole other issue. But there's like a huge part of my identity that I know nothing about because I lost all contact. We had no cousins, we had no aunts, we had no grandparents. Like we lost it all. And so there are times I'm at the doctor and they're asking me like, what runs in the family, and I was like, great question.
It runs on half the side.
Maybe not.
Right.
And so, it's so even as an adult, I'm not interested in participating in this conversation or asking questions that I might need to know. Like, hey, mom, did you know if dad's whatever had, I don't even go there because I don't want to hear it. And I know it.
You're
but I don't wanna
protecting
hear it.
yourself. You've put up those walls to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for younger kids, I mean, the kids that we see, when they start saying, well, I know this is happening and that's happening, and you can start hearing what one parent is saying.
The language.
And my dad's being a jerk because he's not allowing us and he's not letting my mom do this and he's restricting that. I said, what is your dad saying? Nothing. He's not saying anything. And so a narrative starts to get created for the kid, even though they don't want to hear it. They're now the ally to the mom. Well, the father go, well, what do you think would happen if both parents didn't tell you anything? Well, then I wouldn't really know. And I'm like, but then would that change how you feel about your dad, who your mom is creating a whole picture with? She's like, oh, well, maybe, right? Because then it's just like, it creates a different dynamic. So the more the kids feed into their kid, more the parents feed into their kids, as allies, sharing them too much information, getting their opinion, buying into the conflict that the other parent-child may have. Like whatever it is, the more that they pull their closer together, it pulls them further apart from the other parent, and it doesn't give the other parent an opportunity to build a relationship with that kid.
Mm-hmm.
To, maybe correct some of their own parenting if they're not doing well. It creates so much damage.
And an internal struggle for the child.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's tormenting the child.
Tormenting.
Right?
Tormenting.
Kids need to worry about kid things. I always say that,
Yeah.
right? They don't need to be, privy to who's not paying for Section 7s or who's withholding something or they don't need to know any of that.
And I one of the things that, again, that we work with, even with our parents, it's like the parents are like, it's not fair. My kid needs to do soccer and they're not paying. And I'm going to make sure my kid knows that the other parent's not paying for soccer. And I'm like, why? Why? I had to talk to a dad the other day because he said, he set up this kid and I stopped him. He says, I asked the kid what he's doing for Halloween and he wants to be with do. And I said, but it's not your day. Why? But I wanted to know what he wanted to do. Why? It's not your day. Stay out of it.
Just setting him up for failure. Yeah.
I go, you just set him up for being disappointed on something he's not going to get because you wanted to know how he was going to do and he wanted to be. And now you're saying, well, he wants to be with me and you're not letting him be with me. But he's not with you. So why do that?
It's just ego.
So yes. And people just get trapped into it thinking the kid wants to be with me. The kid needs this. The kid needs that. How are they going to know? Let it
Unless
go.
you tell them. Don't feed them
Let
that.
it go.
Don't
It's,
feed
in the big picture, him not being with you this Halloween is not going to be the end of the world.
I mean, they're allowed to have feelings about it and feel
Absolutely.
sad or angry or whatever. But yeah.
There's a difference between kids coming to you and saying, hey, I want to do this on this day. And it happens to be on Dad's day or happens to be on Mom's day versus being fed it by the parent. And you can see, I mean, you're both, obviously you guys can see it very quickly. You can see when it's being fed.
And the truth of it is even if you have this inclination to like let your kid know what their other parent is really all about, guess what? They're going to figure it out on their own.
Absolutely.
Exactly right.
You can't hide who you are.
Yep.
Kids are smart. They're going to figure it out.
You both figured it out on your own of what, your parents
We did not need anyone bashing. We knew the truth.
You don't need to bash the other parent.
That's what I always encourage. I'm like, there's no need for you to do this.
They think it's protection, but it's not.
Yes.
You could figure it out.
And we share with them all the time, and you can share with them all the research that's out there, about everything around the impact, intention versus impact and how it all, but they're just so in the moment.
Yeah.
And of course, when we talk about families who are in litigation, it's a whole other ball game, right? Around winning and losing. And so, but they're just so in the moment that they can't see what's going to happen when these children start to enter relationships and what they're looking for and what they need to get out of it and how to function healthy out of it. And so, but they can't. And so, which is why we welcome people to come and talk about it and allow them to sort of express their worries. And they're allowed to have the worries and they're allowed to say whatever it is that they need to say. What's my catchphrase? You can hate your ex as much as you want, but you got to love your kid more. But they just can't see past it.
How do you handle a question like, okay, so you got to leave this bad relationship, but now I have to go and see this person who I know is an asshole? How as a parent are you able, and I mean, sounds like your ex is great and you co-parent well, but what do you do? It took a while. Fair.
It always takes time.
So your kid is coming to you and being like, I don't want to go. And you get to choose, but I don't.
And just and we'll answer that. But the one thing also that we hear parents say is the guilt that they got to leave.
They got to leave.
But their kid is stuck.
Yeah,
in that
they don't have
situation.
to
So it
deal with that anymore.
Same.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
I don't know, Gab. What do you say?
what do you say to a child like who recognizes all of those things, all the reasons why mom or dad are not together?
Let's back that up for a second. I think we need to look at the rationale for why it's difficult, right? Is it parenting style? Like what's the underlying concern for why they don't want to go? Has the other parents set them up? We're starting to see different parent-child contact issues. So is it like, mild, moderate, severe? Where is it going? So it depends, age, gender, relationship, how much involvement did that parent have? How much opportunity did that other parent have to parent that child? Developing, how do you work on helping them develop that relationship so it can be something like different than it was before? Everyone's playing a new role.
Right.
How do you establish those new roles? Or is he just or he or she just an asshole?
Yeah.
Right. And
So I don't,
right.
it's so
Yeah.
hard to answer. I think we try to unpack it and understand the a little bit more of the underlying rationale for why they might not want to go.
Yeah.
But I think also separating the two issues. Marriage is different. Relationships are different than parent-child relationships, and really trying to unpack that.
Yeah.
That could look different. And given an opportunity where you're not parenting under an unhealthy relationship, that could look very different when you move to sort of from your parent brain to your co-parent brain.
Right.
So it's really just sort of separating that for them as well. But at the end of the day, as we've said 100 times, some people are just assholes, and kids will learn what it is. And so they will start to develop a relationship however they see fit with that parent, whether they're staying at their home or just having dinner with them.
Right.
But what we don't want the parents to do is to really, be their cheerleader and go, yep, he's an asshole. Yeah. No, you don't have to go, I know.
Worry,
That's how.
or don't worry, you'll be okay.
Look, I'm okay.
You'll
You'll
be okay.
But I mean, is it fair to maybe say, you know what, let's say dad in this instance, your dad and I weren't a good match in our marriage, but they're still a good parent, or like you have a different relationship as their child than I did as their spouse.
I think if they were saying that, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because
we might be out of a job.
Well, and do you know what I must say? Like,
but what if they're not? What if they're, let's say mom or dad left because of all of these, whether they're controlling and
mom,
all the,
dad.
Yeah.
Any combination of
any
parents.
combination of relationship.
And now that other parent is treating the children similar to how they treated the other parent.
So what we would work with them, we would try to develop coping mechanisms, safety strategies, right? Like if the kid has a phone, do you know how to call 911 if you need to? How do you help the kid be safe in light of having to go, right? Because of court orders or whatever the case may be.
And I think also managing expectations. Just because you have time with another parent, it's not like I'm bored it was just so boring we had nothing to do. And I think helping your child manage the expectations around not every parenting time or every visit or every, thing's going to be this big Disneyland event. It's like sometimes you're just going to sit around and do nothing, and that's okay.
And sometimes that's exactly what kids need. They don't need something scheduled or planned. Guess what we're doing today? Guess where we're going today? No, they just want to be home and just do nothing.
I've seen a lot of instances as well that post-divorce, both parents actually really get to kind of rise to the challenge of parenting, because often there is a more dominant parent in a relationship. And so it's like I try and rephrase it often for my clients of like, you're giving them this opportunity to be a full-time parent almost in a part-time capacity, where like the responsibility and all of that nuance that parents bring, which in my opinion, give the children a more fulsome experience with adults. It's like encouraging coaches and teachers to be a part of our kids' lives. It actually enriches their ability to have and maintain good relationships. And so, we're kind of seeing this rise of the other spouse, the other partner, parenting often for the first time. And I think that's pretty cool.
Because the roles have shifted.
Yeah.
So when you're in a marriage, you establish certain roles.
Yes.
People pay certain bills. People do certain groceries. People do it depends. And if you're the stay-at-home parent that's doing everything, that's a role that you have established with the other parent. So that doesn't mean you automatically have that when you're not together.
Yeah.
Roles have to be reestablished. And so if the other parent's like, well, yeah, I mean, I was the one who was out of the house working and you were the one that's home, but I want to participate now that we are not living together and living in two different homes. I want to be able to attend A, B, and C and this and that. Why am I being restricted, right? Just because, you know, our roles were different when we lived together.
Yeah.
So that adjustment and change, there's an automatic like sort of like entitlement. Say, well, my role was the parent at home, so I get to be the parent at home. And it's like, well,
and I do want to say it is it is more difficult. We're kind of, you know, making it seem like, oh yeah, you get to be a parent, great for you. And I think that is difficult. And I was just gone for a week and I came home and I looked in the fridge and I was like, did you guys eat a single vegetable while I was gone? Everything is rotten. And my husband just looked at me. He goes, we had a great time.
They're alive.
How was your trip? Like, get out of here. Don't fuck with the great time that we had with your controlling and particular ways that you want to parent them.
Yeah.
And it really helped me because as somebody who is married but working with divorce, I'm like, okay, yeah, I got to check myself. It's a lot harder than we think. And it's like, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry. Just go co-parent. Be great. Like, no. The letting go of that control is incredibly difficult.
There's also resentment that
100%.
Right. So like in Gabby's example, she was talking about the parent who maybe wanted the help of the other partner to attend medical appointments or to participate in parent teacher interviews, you know,
and didn't.
While
and
they're
now
married.
They're like, you know, parent of the year. They're coming to like every single, they're doing bake sales and they're like doing all this stuff. And so it's like, where were you for the last 18 years? Where have you been?
But let's talk, resentment is jealousy. Right? Resentment is jealousy. So there's a pattern of behavior that developed into that where it's like, I resent you because I had to do all of it and I wanted you to show up and you didn't. And so I'm jealous that you got to do whatever the hell you wanted and I had to do it all and I was exhausted. And now you want to do it? Like what? Screw you. So there's a whole bunch of ego that sort of falls into this dynamic and it's very hard. And we're not minimizing it. It is hard. It is hard work to get yourself out of your ego. And people are driven by their emotions as opposed to the facts. And they get stuck in the now instead of the bigger picture.
And I think the longer the divorce goes on for,
worse.
the separation, the harder it is to get into that space where you're just, you know, co-parenting and living and trying to make the best of it and trying to encourage relationships. The longer you spend in litigation and going through all of that just makes it's impossible.
Yeah. Expediency is definitely helpful for all parties involved.
That was, I don't know, that was my goal. I don't know about you. I don't know.
A couple of years.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. No, we're done now. But this is just one of the reasons why I'm in the job that I'm in now, in the career that I'm in now. And, you know, it's because I've been through it. But, you know, when you have a drawn out, lengthy divorce, it just wears everyone down. And there's not much left at the end of it between the two people to actually have a co-parenting relationship.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I knew like the time I separated to the time that my ex moved out was 8 months. And that 8 months was hell. Yeah. And it was hard. It was hard. And then the healing began. Yeah. Right. And it wasn't easy. The first year is like, so, I mean,
it's a blur for people.
Yeah. It's a blur. So, you know, resolution that that was like a goal of mine. But
and you had the professional experience at that time, which obviously informed. So the four of us here have been touched by divorce personally, and we're all working in this profession. 5 of us here.
Right? If you want to weigh in, come on in.
But final thoughts, final tips. I mean, we could chat forever about this.
We could talk all day.
But anything as we wrap up that we can leave our listeners with?
You always are the wrap up girl.
Now we're silent.
I know. I'm like,
I have no idea of the time. She just always tells our guests when it's time to wrap up. I just keep going.
Ryan just shoots me some.
You guys have something going on here that I don't see?
You guys have a look?
I'm not part of this.
You were so out of the look.
I am totally left out.
As my kids say, threesomes are hard. Okay? Threesomes are hard.
And that's Helen's final tip as we wrap up. Threesomes are hard.
Listen, final tip. This is hard. This is a full-time job. Going through a divorce is a full-time job. And the healing doesn't start until it's over, until the paper signed, until you are out of what I call this messy middle. While you're dealing with lawyers and mediators and trying to develop parenting plans and dealing with finances. You are in this messy middle. And, interestingly enough, clients always say to me, I am forced to make the biggest decisions of my life when I am not in the best emotional state. So how is it that I'm supposed to make these everlasting decisions when I'm not doing well? And so this is about understanding that this is hard work. It is strategy also. It's not just going to come easily. It's about getting the support you need. And I'm not talking about your best friend and your mom and your dad and your aunt and uncle who have an opinion about what you should be doing. Getting people involved who can coach you, who can guide you. There's lots of resources available, both that are free, that you can pay for, but you're not in this alone. Yeah. And there are people, unlike my mother, who could not afford or did not have the resources. That is not the way right now. So get the resources. There is no shame because it's hard to make decisions now. And that's why we see a lot of crappy parenting plans and separation agreements, right? Because you just kind of want to get it done, get it off the table and move on. And then you suffer 5 years later because it wasn't sort of well thought out or you were making decisions based on emotions. So that is
that's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, I have a file right now and we're just doing the parenting plan and I really have to be pushy. I'm like, you're going to regret this choice. Yeah. And this is my job, unfortunately. And you might not want to make a different choice because in the moment, this feels right for you. And maybe historically, that's what it's been like. But let me tell you, you don't want to do this. And I have to almost be that, third party neutral. What we do.
Yes.
And sometimes delivering that kind of hard news reality check is difficult because you're looking at this family and you're like, well, really, you should know what's best for your family. Who am I as this outsider coming in and telling you how to operate your family? But that's literally
we see how these parenting plans play out. We know when so-and-so asks for 50-50, but they're working 80 hours a week and they can't do it. It's unrealistic. But they say they want it because they want to be equal and all those things. And we know what that looks like. So
but you're right. Lean on the professionals, not your family members
that have skin in the game and who are like, you get the kids, get the kids as much as you can. And aren't really necessarily looking out for your best interest.
Exactly. Yeah, that goes back to quality over quantity.
Yes.
I would say also perspective, right? You have kids that come in with, let's say, asshole parents, and they're like, but I've had such a bad run-in. It really does lean on to what you were saying, Helen. People are not in their best state of mind or emotional health when they're managing one of the biggest griefs in their life, right? We talk about death as a grief, divorce as a grief, and loss. And so, there are certain emotional components that people go through, and then they have to make really big decisions. So their parenting can be impacted. And it often is impacted. Yeah. Mine was, for sure, 100%.
The financials,
and I see it, financials are impacted.
Yeah, everything.
So perspective has to be put into place. So when you think about these kids experiencing this, 2 to 3 years of their life is a huge percentage. 2 or 3 years of an adult's life is a tiny percentage. So they're impacted so much. But if they can get their shit together and put their ego aside, and all of the things that we say are easier said and done. But perspective is, recognizing that you can do better, that repair is possible. If we can put our ego in check and focus on focus on love and compassion, you could be better parents, and then you'll have longer lasting relationships with your kids and keep them out of the middle. Keep them out of it, resolve it, move on. Yeah. Keep them out. They will survive. Yeah. But if you don't make them, do better, then they won't do it.
And your kids are not your therapists.
Yes.
Right? You don't need to get your validation
friend or confidant
from your children. That's not their role.
Nope.
Yeah. And you are role modeling for them, right? So again, when you think about future relationships for your kids, and you may not be thinking about that at the age of 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, but they will be impacted by what they're by watching you. Yeah. And parents are always saying, oh, we don't fight in front of them, but they don't talk. They don't make eye contact. Yeah. They can't be in the same room together.
They're not sleeping in the same bedroom.
Right. So it's and so what you don't say is just as important as what you do say. So all of it matters, and your kids are watching.
Yeah. 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 And they hear everything.
Well, they hear everything.
Everything.
Everything. Yes. Oh, thank you both so much.
So much
You're the
fun.
best. So much
Yeah.
fun.
Thank
So much
you.
wisdom. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your
Yes.
story.
Thank you too.
Appreciate it.
Me too.
You know what? My goal is just storytelling heals. So the more we can share, the more we can normalize, the more other people will come forward. When they've got problems, we don't have to shame them for it. We can embrace them for it. And we're more similar than we are unique as humans. So we have to embrace.
What she said.
Yeah. Amen, sister. Amen.
This episode was written and created by Alex Howard and Amanda Silver. Produced, edited, and engineered by RTF Productions. Make sure to rate and review our show if you loved it, and give us a follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcasts to stay up to date on all upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening, and go easy on us. We're not your ex.